Sully, what was your reaction before we get Dominic in here? What was your emotional reaction last night seeing Frankie Montas traded to the Brewers?
I mean, I don't want to say stoked, but we're looking at baseball trade values is not it's not an all knowing, it's not the Bible, but it's a good guideline of like, hey, here's kind of what a rough trade value is like. There's obviously a ton of mechanical things and all kinds of factors that you can't really factor into that, but like he had a negative trade value, right? So kind of getting anything in return for him was going to be a positive, and they got a piece back in Jakob Junis that is going to help him eat some innings through the rest of this year, or they could deal him today. I don't know. I don't see a great reason why they wouldn't deal him today. And you got Joey Wiemer, which is just an interesting dude. I actually, maybe it's too small of a sample size, but he annoyed the crap out of me when the Reds played him last year. I mean, granted, I think he had a probably better run against the Reds than he had on the rest of the calendar, but he's got tools. He's a very, 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 very good defender, like extremely good defender, which the Reds they do not have too many good defenders. I can tell you that. So hitting, it looks like he's had some success at AAA this year. We'll see what that can maintain, but he just looked like a guy with those kind of tools and a floor that's similar in a way to Ellie, and that he's going to play good defense and going to run the base as well. Like that's a decent floor for a major leaguer. He's got power. If he gets the bat on the ball, like, dude, that's a good minimum fourth outfielder to have. And to get like that kind of value for, a couple months of Montas, who's not been very good. I mean, he just has not, was kind of got me excited, honestly. Like I'm very like macro. I'm pretty frustrated with things like a lot of Reds fans right now, but micro, I thought that was a great deal. And, I don't know, it got me more invested in this trade deadline because it's like, man, if that's the market, then, this might get a little bit interesting. Also, like I want the Brewers to win the division. I don't want the Cardinals to. I don't want, any other team. Like the Brewers are the least offensive group of fans to root for. So if I hope Montas helps the Brewers a ton, right? I mean, I actually am genuinely rooting for them because I've got, despite how many times Kirby wants to slight them, I have nothing but respect for the Brewers.
Yeah,
I did a full apology last night. A full apology on the show. I said I'll never, ever discount the Milwaukee Brewers again. And speaking of the Milwaukee Brewers, Dominic's on. I know he's in New York. Is that correct,
Philly.
Dominic?
Philly. Yeah, Yankees,
East Coast.
Phillies.
I was in the ballpark.
Take the train down.
You're in the Northeast.
Well, how you doing, my friend?
We're great. Steamy day here in Philly. Getting ready for Yankees-Phillies Game 2 of this series. Hopefully more entertaining one than last night. We're with TBS Tuesday here. Brian Anderson and Ron Darling on the call. We got John Morosi here as well for all the trade deadline coverage as well.
Well, awesome. So, big move last night. You follow the Brewers very closely. You do the pre- and post-game for radio, and then you're also really invested in Brewer stats and all that kind of stuff, I believe. So, let's I'll give you your Brewers talk first. Frankie Montas, what did you like or what was your overall thoughts about the Brewers making the deal to get Frankie Montas to help them with their playoff hopes this year?
The Brewers are so starting pitcher starved right now. They had already made the move earlier to get Aaron Civale, which, didn't really move the needle a lot for some Brewers fans, which understandably so, a guy who gives up a ton of home runs. And the extra year of control is what really drew the Brewers to Civale. Now, the Montas deal, I think a lot of folks were hoping to swing for the fences with maybe a Jack Flaherty or a Yusei Kikuchi. But once that price came out from Yusei Kikuchi yesterday, from what the Astros gave up to get him, I was like, okay, so probably double that for Jack Flaherty, which is just something the Brewers don't do. And they're okay with operating on the periphery. And I think if you get 8-9 starts out of Frankie Montas, no one says he has to make your postseason roster. I mean, you gave it a shot. Joey Wiemer did not have a future in this outfield. I wish him nothing but the best. The Jakob Junis move was a little curious, but the Brewers just feel that DL Hall is going to fill that role for him, and they had reinforcements ready to go. So it's very much a throw it against the wall and see if it sticks.
So Jakob Junis first, yeah, that was maybe the most surprising piece that the Brewers made expendable. If I'm understanding and reading correctly on his year, the Brewers wanted to use him as a starter this year, and they said that they thought the workload was what hurt his shoulder, was the main cause for that. Kind of set his season back, and then of course he had that really scary injury where he got hit by during batting practice with the ball. But he's pitched very, very well as a bulk pitcher for the Brewers this season.
Yeah, it's something that coming out of spring training, he was built up 4 or 5 innings to be a starter. Makes one start, shoulder's already barking. So shoulder impingement was the diagnosis. Quite frankly, this is a take that is kind of a low bar, but the Brewers have made it this far without him. They can survive without him. 27 innings, I think, this season. And yes, he has thrown some quality innings when they've had him, but you can't have 3 bulk guys in your bullpen because they've got Bryce Wilson, who's generally the bulk guy whenever you're losing. Then you've got DL Hall on the way back, who the Brewers have obviously invested a lot in their future and by trading Corbin Burns to get DL Hall. And then Junis, and Junis only really pitches with the lead. And all right, well, with the shoulder background, if he throws 2-3 innings, he's going to be down for 3-4 days. So he's practically on a starter rotation, which just doesn't work for a team that's trying to make it to the postseason. And furthermore, if he's only going to pitch once a series, if the Brewers make it to the postseason, it's like, okay, well, then why keep him around when you've got an internal option with DL Hall?
I'm almost more curious as to what the Reds are getting out of the Junis part of the deal. I just was saying, I wouldn't be surprised if they moved him here in the next couple hours because they do need to fill some innings here for the remainder of this year. But we're talking 2% chance of making the playoffs right now. We're not right. I don't know if the Reds need to be making a big investment there. It's a curious deal. I was surprised
with
by
the money going back and forth.
Yeah,
and it was very odd. Now there is a mutual option for next year for $8 million. Now, do you pick up $8 million for a guy with shoulder issues? Probably not. But you have that fallback if you really want to do it, or maybe he likes it in Cincinnati and you rework it there. But you're right. The Junis thing was very curious. I think it was more about the Brewers opening up a spot when DL Hall returns later this week.
And
from the Reds' perspective, solely, we talked about it on their show. Nick Martinez is a guy who has certainly been on the chopping block for this team and is potentially getting traded. But on the other side of it is that if you don't move him, you are going to be in search of a 5th starter. And Nick Martinez is a guy that the Reds signed this offseason with the potential of being a starter. So, but what Dom said, you can't have 3 bulk guys in the bullpen. And when Jakob, Junis, Nick Martinez, and if Brent Suter come back and are healthy, the Reds are left in that very same scenario. So to your point, there's to me, it's an indication that more may be coming, but we shall see.
If that's the market for Montas, I would love to see what the market is for Martinez, right? Because I want to talk to you about Wiemer, Dom, because we were just talking before he came on. He's intriguing dude to me. I know you said he didn't have a future with the Brewers, but the Brewers have an embarrassment of outfield, established outfielders and prospects like that. It was a crowded space, and the only suspicion I have here is the Brewers know something we don't. And they're like, we'll dump them on a division rival and let them suffer through all this. But I see the upside there with the defense and the speed and the ability to hit left-handed pitching. And, maybe there's rumors of a swing change that's been, a couple good recent months in AAA. Kind of give me the positives and the negatives of the Wiemer acquisition for the Reds.
Yeah. The rumors are not rumors. They're factual. He has gone through a massive swing change year over year. I talked to him in spring training about it. And he was like, look, I don't want my OPS to look like a batting average anymore because it's just been bad. There's a lot moving. And he called it going fishing when he would cock his hands over the plate and then bring them back. And it was just so much going on. That's a great move. Lucas Erceg to the Royals. I knew Lucas was going to get moved. Oakland A's reliever, former Brewers farmhand, mind you. He converted to be a pitcher while he was a Brewer and then was sent to the Oakland A's to give him an opportunity. But that's a really big move. But for Wiemer, first of all, Cincinnati, UC guy. I think he loves Cincinnati. He absolutely is comfortable there, knows the ballpark, has friends there, absolutely loves being a Bearcat. So having that down the road, there's some kind of not on the stat line stuff that can really help out Wiemer. But talking about his approach and talking about the emphasis on contact now, because the dude is a man-child. When you see him in person, he is every bit of 6'4", 6'5", 220, looks like a linebacker. And it's just like, man, dude, if you can just make more contact, good things are going to happen. And he's in the minors, he had good ball strike discipline. He did not have that in the big league. So he was trying to get back to that in AAA. AAA hitting coach Al LaBeouf was telling me, he's just like, look, you can fail in AAA while working on this swing. That's why it took so long in April and May for it to click. And then he had to come up because of injuries for the Brewers, sent back down, and he's had a weird in-between year. I am intrigued. There's a lot of raw power in there, emphasis on raw, but at the same time, you've got time to work it with him, and he's getting to hit at Great American Ballpark. What more could you ask for?
It's time for the Reds to have invested in defense too. I mean, he's not just a good defender from what I've gathered from the numbers and from watching him. He is like a plus defender in center field.
The nickname was Golden Retriever last year because he just go play fetch, go get it, and he just runs it. He had the long mullet, flowing hair. Yelly gave him that nickname. He is a good defender, very good defender. I mean, he's a bowling ball out there in center field. He wants to get every ball. Even if it's like, no doubt, that should be the left fielder's ball. Wiemer, I got it. He's coming in and everything. It's just, all right, you do your thing, man.
What's the sentiment in Brewers fandom right now? The Yelich injury was, has been tough news. There's still a comfortable lead in first place. I'm fascinated by the Brewers model. I think you and I talked in the offseason with the Burns trade. You said if blah, blah, blah happens and the Brewers have done it again, I think it's fair to say the Brewers have done it again with Joey Ortiz and the value he's provided. But kind of what's you're surviving without the starting pitching, got the Montas addition to hopefully help with that. But what's the vibe going forward?
The vibe is definitely ahead of schedule. I don't think a lot of folks were expecting to compete like this, like to be 7 games up on the division here on the trade deadline day. I think they expected to be competitive around 500. And as we know, with the new expanded playoffs, if you're around 500, you can make the postseason. So the thought is like, man, this is wild that they've done it again, right? Like to go in the same week to acquire Rhys Hoskins and trade Corbin Burns, be like, well, what do you actually want to do here? To now adding at the deadline once again, to not be the, doormat of the rest of the National League, like for some reason the rest of the Central tends to be. And I was talking about this with somebody else, that the Cubs continue to just like, you can look at the National League Central and compare it to the National League West. Like the Dodgers run the West as they should, as they're surrounded by lesser teams. The Cubs have never done that. And it's like, as long as the Cubs are not going to put their foot down and act like the Cubs, the Brewers like, cool, we'll take it. No big deal. Keep being the Rays of the National League or the Guardians of the National League, where everyone overlooks them and they're like, hey, here we are. We know what we're doing.
Were we all the biggest idiots in the world for not taking the Brewers plus 750 before the season started to win the NL Central?
I wouldn't say to win the Central was like a no doubt deal. I mean, we saw what was coming in with the Cubs. We saw what was coming in with the Cardinals, like the Cardinals in their age and everyone going on. It's just like you had to see it like being competitive, but no way you could have seen them in first place, especially given everything that they lost. And then if I told you even more of all the arms that they would lose to this point in the year, it's been very impressive.
What's the biggest need? Like, what are you hoping for as a Brewers fan here? In the coming hours, if there's one more move to be made, what would be the top of the priority list?
I'll never say no to more pitching, but there's not much offense out there here. And Joey Ortiz, I know we talked about his value, but he's been slowing down a little bit. He's been having to deal with the adjustment that the league has made to him. Rhys Hoskins is white hot. Willy Adames is white hot. Terang had slowed down a touch, but he's a leadoff hitter. He's getting things back. And without Christian Yelich, probably for the next 2 weeks at least, maybe more, they have no left-handed power. Jake Bauers is all of their left-handed power. So they need to find a way to get him something, maybe more in that side. But again, there's not much out there, and I don't see Cody Bellinger making the drive up I-94. So I think they're probably done, but I'll never say no to more pitching.
All right, Dom, we're gonna let you go. This is not my show. I just you can't take the interviewer host out of me. But
I love it.
I know what you're burning on, so I'd get it out of you. But appreciate you dropping some perspective on the return from the trade from the Reds and the Brewers. I hope it helps the Brewers. I don't know if I'm alone in that amongst Reds fans, but I genuinely hope it helps the Brewers, and I want to see them make sure they finish off the division. We cannot have any of this Cardinals business happening. None of it, please.
I agree with that. The voodoo magic's not good. I've known Frankie since his A's days, so I'm really excited to reunite with him and see him again. So who knows? They could look like geniuses again come October. Like they did it again. So we shall see. But thanks for having me, guys.
Again, what I'm going to root for here is a mechanical adjustment with the Brewers, and then he re-signs with the Reds for next year. That's best case scenario. So get on that if you can help with that. That'd be great.
Well, I'll let him know. Thanks, Solly.
Right.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Say Dom. He's the best. Dom's the best. He knows so much ball. He just knows prospects and everything. I just love talking baseball with him.
That's awesome. Live, they're about to have a national TV broadcast tonight, coming and joining our little show. That's awesome. The MLB on Turner, that music absolutely bangs. That theme song, gets me every time. I jam to it occasionally in the car. Not gonna lie. Yeah, interesting stuff there. Sully, Brewers. I agree. I maybe feel a little bit differently. The reason I do not want the Cardinals to win the division is not necessarily because of my hatred of the Cardinals. It's because they have a minus 7,000 run differential, and it makes me want to puke. At least the Brewers have actually earned it this year. The Cardinals haven't. They have the devil magic working. It's disgusting. That is what drives me nuts. It's not really the whole I hate the Cardinals thing.
And I look at the run differential in the standings every day, and it frustrates me. But there is something like, look, I'm in kind of two camps on this, right? There is definitely something to, hey, if you're good at scoring runs and good at preventing runs, like you just have a good baseball team, right? But the second layer of that is like, are you equipped to be able to handle like not every run and prevented and scored is created equal, right? And the way this is maybe a little too simplistic, but the way the Reds are structured, being so platoon heavy, feels like they get exposed in late game situations all the time. It's almost impossible not to get exposed between having to flip flop between Espinal and Fraley and Benson, and then just, I mean, this many when you live on the margins like the Reds have, getting their record in 1-run games, I just don't think is straight luck, right? I'm sure some luck involved in that, but they have, showed an incredible ability lately to blow games where they've had leads and just like get inch, and, have great pitching, but have not nearly enough offensive production throughout it and not able to push across a late run to make it happen. And, there's a skill to winning close, intense games, right? Teams with great bullpens and 1 to 2 great back of the bullpen. Like I don't have it in front of me. What's the Guardians record in 1-run games? I'm sure it's massively in their favor because of how great the back end of their bullpen is. And they're able to, those super high leverage innings, they're able to gut out those wins. So I don't think the Cardinals deserve it. I wish MLB the app would get rid of the expected win-loss number in that actual standings. I don't need to see that every day. It doesn't count for anything. I want to believe in that too, but it just doesn't count for anything.
Yeah, I agree to an extent. Like I think it has to be a mixture of both. I don't think the Reds are nowhere. Like bad teams could luck into a good 1-run record, right? But I think the Reds, if you look back, they had 1 year where they were like 30 games under 500 and they had a winning record in 1-run games. Like clearly that team wasn't deserving of that. But I do think with your point with the platoon, I think the injuries personified it. It made it stick out way more than I think it would have, because the Reds ended up becoming so platoon heavy where like guys like Santiago Espinal and Austin Slater are like your platoon margins, and that's just not at all what they were hoping for this season. But Sully, the Montas deal was so much more than I thought they were going to get.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Reds were probably fine to not deal him, right? I mean, if the return was going to be nothing really of value, then you are going to need somebody to eat the innings. He's been a positive clubhouse influence. You saw kind of the reaction from everyone yesterday. So, but again, like first thing I did was text Dom about this last night. And he's like, the Brewers are going to have a 40-man crunch. And, Wiemer didn't have a fit in there. So it's like, this is kind of what you would draw up in a deal of like, both teams are going to get some value out of this, right? The 2 months of Montas is going to mean something to the Brewers, whether it's good or bad, we'll see, but it's going to be meaningful either way. And like the 4+ years we're going to get of Wiemer is it was going to go to waste for them probably. And it has potential to be of value on our side. So I don't know why I'm that much higher on Wiemer than a lot of people seem to be. I think it's the prospect pedigree and the tools just to say like, maybe this is, I don't know enough about this comp, but I've not thought about it long, but Drew Stubbs kind of came to mind. I mean, Stubbs, had a decent major league career, but a taller guy, struck out too much, didn't have the best hit tool, but had power, was a great fielder and had speed. Like, the Reds have had a little bit of success with that. You're not going to, at minimum, having him as a depth piece is a good thing. And I have a whole bunch of thoughts on future strategy for the Reds and all that. Like, I think if we go back to when I came on, prior to the season, it was kind of like, dude, I don't know about 2024. I just don't see like ascension for everybody. And we've seen some pretty strong regressions from, mostly on the outfield side, injuries and, regressions in a lot of ways to say like they're still like decently positioned where all of a sudden, if Benson and Fraley become your, and Wiemer now become your depth outfield pieces behind like 1 to 2 stronger outfield bats, all of a sudden this lineup looks so freaking good. Like it really does. And they're still like the injury risk is very real because while they can get like to average to above average at almost every position, they still don't have like that monster bat that is going to be the 150 plus, weighted runs created plus that is just that much more dominant. So that's where you can get exposed pretty quickly of like, even with solid depth like they've had. I mean, McLean being out, they've gotten a 2-win season out of Jonathan India to this point. Like second base has not been the problem, but I don't know. I've got a lot of Red thoughts that are constantly flowing through my brain. It's been a mind-numbingly frustrating year on so many fronts, but they don't need to blow up the whole nucleus, right? And that's not the worst place in the world to be.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, it's just been a frustrating year, but I get why there's a lot of people that just won't believe anything at this point, and I think that's fair. Like, I think that the Reds have earned that based on the past, but I think if you really do take a step back, I think there's a lot of reasons to still be very, very excited about this core and what the Reds have the potential to do. And it starts obviously with Ellie De La Cruz and Hunter Green turning in from players we love to superstars this year.
Well, that being said, though, I am about 1,000. Like, I think this team can be good next year as it's currently constructed, but I do not think they should be even close to being done to moving stuff around, right? Either signing free agents, trading some of their active MLB players to move around value to different spots would not scare me. And I am not scared to move anybody other than, say, Sal Stewart, Rhett Lauder, or Chase Burns in the farm system. I mean, it is, again, we're talking about a team that's not that far away, and you're not going to need a lot of stuff on the prospect front to fill in for several years. I mean, really, catcher is the first need that's going to come up in terms of where we'll need a prospect to come up. But the rest, like if Marte is who Marte is supposed to be, third base is fine. If Ellie's already who he's supposed to be, that's fine. McLean, if he comes back healthy, that's fine. We got 2 more years of India right there to back up on the second base side. He can be a DH. CES / maybe another big dumb bat that can play first base, or Steer rotates in first base. We're fine there, right? But filling those outfield spots, that's the move today that I'm waiting for, that I do not feel like is coming as of this point. On the rumor front, like, I want them to make a Scott Rowland-like trade of, look, we're out of it this year, but that does not mean we cannot improve our team for 25 and 26 at this deadline, right? There's teams that are ready to move on with certain pieces. The prices have been high on a lot of this stuff, so it's not like it's going to be free. I am fine to give up valuable pieces for bona fide major league hitters because I don't see the answer coming in the farm system for at least 1 to 2 years on the offensive front that's going to save a well below average offense. The offense for the Reds has been below average by weighted runs created plus for 18 of the last 19 seasons. Like, think about that for a second. Like, they've not had a park adjusted league average offense. The 1 year was 2010 that they've had above average offense. Like, they need a lot more help with bats. Almost every team wants more offensive help, right? But like, it needs to be very serious help, like Anthony Santander and a trade of some other kind to make this lineup to bolster up. And I'm a prospect hugger in general. Like, I understand the value of prospects. I don't see a ton of stuff that is ready to help the Reds anytime soon. And because you have this window that's actually kind of long, like, it just doesn't scare me to deal people. It really does not. More so, you got 3 to 4 years to backfill a lot of those spots. If some of these deals don't work out, you can always sell off pieces. for more, farm system assets. I'm ready for the Reds will need a shuffle of some kind. I'm very, very, very confident in that.
Yeah. Well, I got a comment here in the chat from Nick Norman, who's a loyal listener, and I do think it's as I think a lot of people hear like that stat that you just
it's
you
confusing,
and they get a little confused, and I totally understand why. That stat is adjusting for the park. So if you use like any stats that are just baseline like OPS, the Reds have been above average probably more times than not over that same time period, or at least close to it. They've been a lot more than one. They're getting punished because of the ballpark, which is fair. Like they should. You should expect the Reds to have a top 10 offense almost every year in the ballpark in terms of like OPS. So that's what Sully's pointing out, just to kind of make it a little more I don't know, clear. It's kind of a confusing.
It's all relative, right? Like weighted runs created plus is a relative stat. It's basically like if everybody played park neutral here, because it's like, all right, that value of that OPS is only, well, let's say you get a 40-point OPS boost as a team playing in a home ballpark. I don't know what it actually is, but like you give that right back with the pitching, right? I mean, that's not going to help you win. Playing in Great American Ballpark and having a higher OPS is not going to help you win there because your pitchers are dealing with the same thing on the other side. In theory, like that's why that number adjusts for all that, to say like, if you want to be a better baseball team, like you need to be able to create runs at a higher rate than the visiting teams are going to come in and be able to create at the rate that they can in the 81 games that they play here. Obviously, those teams change out with every series and whatnot, but you still, when you adjust for the boost that they get, they're performing way below average very frequently. It's very tough.
So what'd you think about Lucas Sims getting dealt for basically a team's fringe top 30 prospect, a lottery ticket? Definitely has some upside, but a lottery ticket.
Yeah, you said it. I mean, Sims has not been my favorite pitcher to watch this year. It's quite frustrating. I know I've read Mitch's stuff on the Stuff Plus, and I see what the cutter rates as, but man, it just doesn't seem like they can really even trust him. And I didn't understand their usage of him on Sunday. It was one of the weirdest games I've ever watched, or one of the weirdest games I've seen this team play this year. It's worth it to get somebody with some upside. I still their focus seems to be on pitching for understandable reasons. I'm wondering if getting that Wiemer piece is kind of like, okay, I was looking for them to get a AAA or up outfielder in some way with some of their deals, and it's important for people that are watching all this and remember this. Like the pieces we're talking about trading are not especially valuable pieces, right? Even as rentals, they are not shut down back of the bullpen guys that teams are going to be willing to give up a lot of stuff for. There's going to be a great market for. They're going to have better uses on other teams, so it's kind of like we'll take whoever offers up the best, and somebody that can throw 99 at the release point that he throws it at seems to be of interest. It's kind of like a lottery ticket of, hey man, if you get 5 of those arms to come through your system, that all have bad control, and 1 to 2 of them end up getting their control figured out. That's kind of how you have to approach it. And Reds have had success on that front. I mean, Zach Maxwell and was it Anier Loriana or Luis May, I believe as well. Kind of the high upside arms are where a lot of teams are wanting to keep some roulette chips because you can get a lot of value out of that in the future potentially. So
what do you think here about these final 2 hours? Do you think anyone else moves? I feel like I'm going to put the over under at 1.5 more moves.
I would think it would. It's shockingly quiet. We only have 2 hours to go. I don't see any reason for Buck Farmer to still be a part of the team. I mean, teams are not idiots. Teams are not going to be like, oh, he's got a low ERA. Like, I'll trade a valuable prospect for him. I think we all know kind of what's under the hood with Buck. He's been great for the Reds this year. I couldn't imagine even getting some kind of return from him at this point when it was kind of like, dude, I felt like all year it felt like he's one bad, inning or game away from being DFA'd, and it just never came, man. It was actually really impressive, but I'd be stunned if he wasn't moved. The Reds are in one of those weird spots where I think, honestly, they could end up being a better team after dealing a fair amount of decently valuable bullpen arms, right? They just kind of have a flux of bullpen arms that, I want to see Zach Maxwell come up this year. I want to see Yasser Zulueta get a lot more innings. this year. I think the Reds
Yes.
should see. I mean, Tony Santion's numbers and stuff plus and location and pitching plus stuff looks really good. I mean, let's ride that out. I don't think he's maybe as valuable of a trade chip sitting here now as he might be come this offseason, or he could be a back of the bullpen piece for them for next year. So clearing out some of these guys that have provided value to the Reds, but like I like a lot of people here, I'm kind of good on 2024. I'm not holding out hope when. I mean, Santiago Espinal's DHing tonight. Like every time I see that, I'm just kind of like, dude, it's not the year. Like it's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. I wish it was, but it just isn't. So, who do you think is most likely to get moved?
I think Nick Martinez is most likely. I said earlier, I think if you could give me Justin Wilson and Buck Farmer versus Nick Martinez, I think that one of the two of them getting moved. But I think it's really just whichever one of those two brings back I want to say highest return, but it's probably any return. I don't think the Reds are just going to give away anyone. And I think mainly because they just actually did spend some money to get Ty France. Like I don't think I think the Reds mindset is 90% 2025 and beyond. But I do think the Reds are putting value in two things this year. I think they want to give this team a chance, even if it's really small.
Sure.
But I think they also want to develop some good habits. I think they want this team to still be trying to win.
Competitive.
And I think trying to win and trying to stay in a race, I think they view that as valuable. I know a lot of people might scoff at that, but I have heard that before. I've heard that before from people in the front office that they really want to try to teach winning and teach being competitive and not allow a team to fall so far out of the race that you just develop bad habits. So
Culture.
I think they're trying to do two things at once here, and I do think there's more value to that than maybe people like even a lot of people who are very analytically based like myself. I do think there is value to trying to win, trying to stay competitive, but the main priority right now, because of where you're at, needs to be acquiring pieces when you have opportunities to capitalize on them. But I think you have to try to do two things at once here, and I think that's totally okay.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, honestly. And I honestly don't think they, the way they're structured right now, their most valuable pieces are all guys that are coming back, right? So it's almost impossible that they would blow it up. Do you think that there's any possibility that anybody gets traded that is not a rental between now and 2 hours from now?
I think it's unlikely. I mean, unless there's a last minute panic move from another GM that comes through and they say, we're going to give you the absolute moon for Andrew Abbott. I think the Reds might consider that. I do think there is a little bit of a possibility that Candelario gets moved if the Reds find someone that will take on most of his salary. And then India, it's just really, I don't know. I feel like the India momentum is dead, but we've seen with other trade deadlines, things can get really wonky in the last hour. It's so unpredictable because I've been a guy that I've never been an idiot and tried to do a live stream for 4 hours before. But I always try to take off work, I'm in my past jobs and just sit and enjoy the day. And there's sometimes you sit and you think, it's gonna be exciting, and then oh wow, like nothing happened in the last 2 hours. And there's other years where it's just complete and utter chaos. So I guess that's kind of what makes it
deadline
fun.
Overall.
Yeah.
I mean, it's maybe not today as much, but it's been like I've been glued to my phone just with what other teams are doing and everything. It's been one of the more interesting. Maybe last year was kind of such a dud, just kind of with the unfamiliarity of the new playoff system, and teams didn't really were a little afraid of where the value is and didn't want to be like market makers necessarily. Now we're seeing, a lot more movement, a lot more activity, and people, teams kind of going for it a little bit more. I've been kind of percolating this thought, and I'm curious your thought on this. I keep hearing like, all right, there's the gap between MLB pitching and AAA pitching has never been bigger. It's expanding. It's blah blah blah. It's to the point where like And we've seen enough like top prospects come up and struggle, to make their way. Jackson Chourio struggled initially, but he figured things out very quickly. He's had a great run. Jackson Holiday obviously had a horrific start to his career. Wyatt Langford has not had the year that a lot of people were projecting, and these are some of the best hitters in the minor leagues. I'm honestly curious, and I want the Reds to be on the forefront of this. And I'm saying this as a fan that has 0.1% of the information that they're dealing with. But like back to what I was saying about not being afraid to trade prospects, like I value guys that have proven that they can hit in the major leagues higher now than I ever have, following as a fan remotely, of saying like, dude, I don't know where else you're going to find like hitting value other than out there on other teams that, I just would be one. I don't think the Reds have really any great hitting prospects that are approaching to come up anyways, but two, even if they did, I just don't think you could see that as a viable option, right now, because of how tough that transition's been for so many players. To say like the market, I almost don't think they could overspend on getting a viable bat at this deadline or in this offseason, right? I mean, just go get somebody that's going to give you 2 to 4 WAR. And that's why I was a big fan of the Candelario signing, which is starting to look a little suspect. I thought he was a better defender than he has been, which is, where a fair amount of his value comes from. To say like, this team needs more bona fide bats, like guys that we have the answer on of who you are, because as much as I'm a Will Benson appreciator, I just don't see like a 40% K rate possibly being a sustainable major league regular.
The Reds are in a hard spot because they have 17,000 DHs right now.
It's not a good place to be.
That's what just makes it so hard to figure out how to build this team. And the Reds have a lot of players that we love, but it's so easy for the Reds to get a good DH because of the ballpark that they play in, because you're going to be able to attract those guys that are looking for 1-year prove-it deals to reestablish their value a little bit. Like I love like Ryan Mountcastle. Like that's the guy that is such a perfect,
I know,
great American ballpark fit. But I'm like,
well, can I help with this?
How do you fit him?
Can
in?
I help? I guess where the Reds rank in weighted runs created plus as at DH in this season.
I'm sure it's awful.
29th out of 30.
Yeah,
we have a team full of DHs and none of them can hit.
Well, Spencer, in fairness, like if Spencer Steer would have been the DH all year, it wouldn't be 29th. But because they've had other guys get hurt, Spencer Steer hasn't been DHing as much. Candelario hasn't been DHing as much. Jonathan India even hasn't been DHing at all. And those were really supposed to probably be the 3 guys that were going to be rotating the DH. So I think that it really, the DH problems this year were because of the problems at other positions. Like I think it was a cumulative effect that kind of moved on that way. But I just think it's so easy for the Reds to go get that DH type, and then there's still that Christian Encarnacion Strand guy that could be the best hitter the Reds have right now. That unfortunately we had a completely wasted season on him when we needed to find out how good is he or not, and we don't know that answer. And that's just what makes it so hard to try to build a team. I mean, you're going to have to, whatever the Reds do, and they could go like 5 different ways here, they're going to almost have to throw a dart and hope that they hit.
Yeah. What how are we feeling about Marte?
I'm still confident in Marte. I mean, Marte is have you
looked under the hood? Have you looked under the hood?
He's the same age as Rhett Lauder. You have to remember that.
I know. I know.
He wasn't supposed to be here yet. I think him getting up last year ended up being a really bad thing. I really do. I think him getting to the big leagues last year and having that success, I think it almost hurt him. I don't know. I don't put a lot of stock into what he's done this year. Now, if I don't see any signs by the end of September, then I'm going to be a lot more concerned. But I need more time. Let's see how those numbers end up coming out. The walks are concerning. I did not expect him to have this few of walks, but this guy had no real like spring training. He just kind of got thrown into it. And I think the Reds had to throw him into it. Like, you didn't really have a lot of choices. You need to throw him out there and see if you could hope that he would, hit the ground running. I still am very bullish on Marte. I would say this: I'm a big Will Benson believer, but I'm more bullish on Marte than I am Benson.
Oh, for sure. Look, I think I'd love some intel on this if this is to be the case. But like, the one thing to look at, and granted, his batted ball profile has been awful so far, but the one thing that a lot of us were saying in the offseason was like his launch angle last year was 1.9 degrees. Like, for a slugger, you should get that up, right? Well, it's up to 10.9. So part of me is wondering, like, is he working on some launch angle stuff that would help explain why he is Javi Baez level exposed on low and away sliders? Like, it looks absolutely horrific, but he's had a lot of pop-ups in there and hasn't been like, it's not that he's launching the ball up in the air, but I'm wondering if that could be a contributing factor. Is he working on some launch angle stuff, which isn't as simple probably as we, us sitting here would like to make it out to be. It involves like making contact with the ball at a different part. It's earlier in the whole process of the ball coming to the plate, which can affect decision making. If you end up swinging more often because you're trying to cheat and get out in front of balls so you can launch them up in the air. I'm totally like coming up with this theory as to why he's been so bad, because it's just like, dude, where like this, we didn't see you look like this last year. Not that guys go through slumps, but I just don't see guys look this lost swinging at balls that are 4 feet off the plate sometimes. And I'm still amazed that anybody throws him inside. I mean, if I'm pitching him, I'm wasting one inside off the plate maybe, but I'm not getting him anything to hit on the inside part, because he will swing at it on the outside.